We're at Carpenter Park today, a 342-acre Illinois dedicated nature preserve, which means that all things are protected. We can only leave footprints and take memories. It's owned by the Springfield Park District, established in 1921. In 1932, a Conservation Corps camp was here at the site of Carpenter Park, and they built this stone picnic shelter was one of their projects. They also built cabins on the park for the crew themselves. And if we were to go through the canyon trail, we could see the flagpole from their cabins and parts of the suspension bridge from their camp. This is a large white oak, and there are many trees like this at Carpenter Park. This one has been aged to be 309 years old, which makes it older than most things that we can think of happening in Illinois. This tree saw bison. We probably had Lincoln take a nap underneath it at some time. But it's incredible to think about what's been happening here in Springfield for over 300 years. And so in the timber, trees have bark to protect themselves from fires. When a tree gets to a certain age, its size is enough to protect it in most cases. A symbiont relationship is present with lichens, and for every species of trees is a different species of lichen that consumes the bark that the tree no longer needs. And so in the forest we can see these different bark patterns from where the lichens have consumed more or less of the bark on the tree. And then go to the bark. This is spice bush. This is one of the high quality shrubs present at Carpenter Park, and they are here by the thousands. I don't see spice bush in many other forests. If cattle have been put in for grazing, this is one of the first things that's removed. Pioneers used the leaves of this shrub to make tea and spice different meats, hence the name spice bush. Carpenter Park is one of the largest assemblies of old-growth trees in Illinois. Due to the sandstone outcrop that we see near the highway, that sandstone runs about 4 feet underneath the whole upland. So there's only 4 to 6 feet of soil in the uplands here, forcing these trees to grow very slow. In other forests, I'll see black oak like this that we were just looking at, growing at a 1/4 inch to an 1/8 inch a year. Here we're seeing a 1/16 of an inch to a 32nd of an inch. Woodworkers from the past would have desired to have these tight ringed trees for quarter sawed oak. It's one of my dreams to ever try to get one of these logs out myself. So here we have shagbark hickory, and it also has a different lichen, this one being light green compared to the white on the white oaks. But I just find it unique, these symbiont relationships and unique species selections. Winter creeper, prevalent inside the urban areas of Springfield. This vine used for a ground cover around houses, when it turns and grows vertical, will fruit and make little berries. Birds eat the berries, the birds come into our natural areas, the bird takes a crap, we get exotic species. So this is the St. Petersburg sandstone that I was just talking about. And we can see there's only 3 feet of dirt above it here as we're just starting to come out of the uplands. And so this is running through the whole upland component here at Carpenter Park, making the trees here some of the slowest growing trees that I know of in central Illinois. In the 1980, when I moved here, when we started doing research on Carpenter Park, the Friends were called the Friends of Carpenter Park at that time. I've cataloged the trees, the densities, the species that are here, and I've aged over 100 trees in the forest here. When I first came here, DNR classified Carpenter Park as mature second and third generation growth. And until the work that me and some of the friends have done to prove that this was the largest old growth forest in central Illinois. But that was 20 some years ago. And I knew every tree in the woods. And I had many 500 and 400-year-old friends here. But coming here recently, I've noticed that a lot of my old friends are gone. And so it's a different place for me, but we're still finding many trees in the 300-year-old range surviving. But with climate change and all of these other things going on, it's amazing that these things still are here at Carpenter Park. And even to think of what was going on over 300 years ago, I mean, there were bison under these trees 300-400 years ago. Abe Lincoln walked under these trees in his lifetime. And so a lot of things have happened here at Carpenter Park, from the Kickapoo Indians to us. And it's just one of these great places still around. Here in the floodplain of Carpenter Park, we have some of the largest pawpaws that I know of. Most places I go, they're young ones like this. But here we have 8 and 10-inch diameter pawpaws. And let me tell you, when you shake one of these in the fall, you better be wearing a hard hat when the fruit comes down. Pawpaws are a floodplain species, much like bitternut hickory and sassafras. And these are species without the natural processes of controlled fire or periodic fire. They are on the move. They're moving up into the uplands. And so most of the management here to maintain the uplands is keeping the floodplain species back in the floodplain. Periodic fires is our best tool to try to help push them back. What is it? 110.2. Okay. Burrows are formed on trees. They're an uncontrolled growth form, much like a cancer, usually caused from an injuring event. A tree fell, broke a branch off, but highly desired by cabinet makers. The wood grain is completely swirled in a very unusual pattern inside there. But they make bowls, gun stocks, and all kinds of high cabinet making laminated wood. But if this wasn't a nature preserve, it would have been logged just for the burl in it 100 years ago. Everyone always asks me, how old is this tree? And just looking at a tree, we have no idea how old it could be. In the uplands, we showed you the sandstone formation and the poor soil content that the upland trees are growing in. Down in the floodplain, that's a whole different animal. These trees have all the water they ever need, all the nutrients they ever need. And so behind me here, we have about a 3-foot diameter bur oak with a burl in it. It's 325 years old. I'm going to show you a bigger tree that's only half its size. I've had many professors tell me this is an old channel of the Sangamon. And I am here to set them wrong, tell them they are wrong. But this is the new channel of the Sangamon. And probably within our lifetime, it will cut its way across Gergens Park, and Riverside Park will become much bigger that moment. But the water comes in one direction here. It hasn't made its way all the way across. It's got about 100 yards of erosion still to occur. Then as the river drops down, all of this water backflows back out from where it came in. And there's about 3 spots where water comes in and inundates the floodplain. Carpenter Park is the largest example of a non-levied, natural channeled floodplain river in central Illinois. Outside of the Carpenter Park area, we get right into the Army Corps of Engineers levee system for flood control. And we found that it makes more flooding downstream than helping upstream. but Carpenter Park will inundate on its own. The whole floodplain will fill with water. The water volume that's here keeps the sediment-laden water from the river from bringing sediments into the forest. And it's here that we can see the natural formation of a river at work. Energy, erosion, deposition. These are the natural processes of the river. I just tell them that this is the new channel.
Okay.
And it's easy to imagine that water comes this way and goes to Gergen.
Highlighted.
There. Oh.
Oh my God.
You see the pileated?
Going to the left?
Yeah. Normally they're real low to the ground. You can just see them going ahead of you.
I knew they were here, but I just hadn't seen them here yet.
I normally hear them here all the time, and it's down in here. From here on in the floodplains where I normally would see them.
This is where we hammock is right up
Why not?
Yeah.
But I think it's easy to imagine water coming in and then back flowing out.
Well, there'll be water. Hopefully there'll be water here.
We hope
rain.
there isn't, but.
Wow.
Boy, that burrow is just something from this angle.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They have a term for this, but this is where the river, the soil-laden water has deposited its solids. And they go down, especially on these silver maple, and they'll dig along the side of it and see how many spots it's got new growth root coming as it got buried.
Okay.
And so they can age the roots going down. But it's quite easy to see from those large roots that there's over 2 feet of silt has been laid down here in a recent time pattern.
In there?
No, this is a cocoon, a pupa. This was a moth.
Okay. He's already escaped though, right?
Yeah, it came out or was attacked. One of the two. Oh, you got some good bark. So this is 12?
Yes.
Okay, you got it in the ground. And we'll do our hackberry bit. In this book, she writes about one of the things that caught her attention was there's a small piece of opal inside the seed of hackberry. And there's seeds hulls. These little round cups are seed hulls from hackberry seeds. And we're going to read a paragraph of the book about that here. So natural processes running a floodplain is flooding. There are no trees here because this is underwater part of the year, making little trees very difficult to establish and keeping this open character of the floodplain present. We can see by various thicknesses of grasses where it's inundated more. And in the far distance, you can see the channel of this section of floodplain along the bluff is all covered in Virginia rye, I believe it is, or sea oats. And it's just those places are inundated longer than everywhere else. Come on, Dexter, bring it with you. If you see any horizontal marks on the trees, like the white in the base of this, these are ice scars where ice is formed and then fell. Here would be one right here where ice was on the tree. And normally you can see that they're in similar elevations in the profile. And in the floodplain, a few inches makes a huge difference. So in my opinion, this tree's bigger than the burled one. No. I only cored 2 bur oaks. This one's 165 years old. And so just mind-blowing from the one that we just looked at that was over 300. This one's bigger and only half its age. But the river is right there. All the nutrients it ever needed are being washed in. Oh, Steve, another burl. Box elder burls.
That's a good buck.
Which one? That's the better one.
I've only found one here then.
I've picked them up as big as beach balls off of the burled one. But yeah, I never would have thought that a tree like that, of that size, was only that old. And so we got a number here, 13, the young oak. Oh, that's a great title. The young oak.
There was one, looks like one was growing actually right here.
So this is one of the other new channels. And so this is where water comes in and inundates this section from the cliffs base, or from the sandstone to here.
Yeah.
And so a few inches makes a huge difference. And so enough deposition has occurred. Spice bush is here. White oak is here. Or these are burrs. There's a red oak down in here on this little ridge that I would have never thought should have been able to live down here. Here you can see where the grass dominates. And so this area is inundated even longer. But it's all sea oats. And here's where we start to get into sycamores. And they're beautiful against the blue skies down here. That's our green comma again. Last year's butterfly. It landed. That butterfly came out last year and overwintered as an adult. The green commas and morning cloaks will do that. The fluids in their body turn into an antifreeze. And it does a whole metamorphosis of its internal fluids. But there are only a few species known to do it. This box elder fell over, and this is a sprout off of the fallen log, or 3 sprouts. But you can see the mother log, the log rooted. But these 3 stems are all from the same individual. Here's my red oak and big pawpaw. This tree can't survive being underwater. And so this little bit of bank is high enough for it to survive 100 or more years. Small elevation changes in the floodplain make a big difference for some plant survival. Earlier we just pointed out a real nice red oak that was surviving down here on the edge of the floodplain because the ground has risen enough for it to not be flooded. These 2 red oaks right here obviously have been flooded off and have died recently, most likely due to climate change and increased flooding events along the Sangamon. I should have brought my bat sonar. We could have turned it on. If there were bats in there, we'd hear it clicking. Come on. Sycamore. 291 years old. And if they think this is big, there's a hollow one down in, well, it's the lower part of Carpenter.
Okay.
That on our website, there's a picture of me and 11 people inside of it. And it's twice this size.
Yeah.
In the Wabash River, they talk about large sycamores there reaching sizes and being hollow enough, one that they could put 20 horses inside. In others, they would stack ears of corn and use them for grain silos. But they're known to be able to live phenomenally long compared to a cottonwood. Which, if a cottonwood was this big, it would probably be 60 or 70 years old.
Yeah.
Not 200 or 300. I do love the white bark against the blue sky. Kentucky coffee tree is known by the large diameter of new grown twigs. In the books they'll say anywhere from 3/8 to a 1/2 inch diameter. The only other tree exhibiting that kind of growth would be tree of heaven. Tree of heaven has a smooth bark compared to the peely bark of Kentucky coffee tree. It also has male-female trees. Females will have the pods that pioneers ground the seeds in the pods for coffee. As we come back up into the upland, we're hitting that sandstone again. So these big trees were just rooted right down to the rock. And recently the wind has taken them down. Steve, if you pan from here and then get to the west, you'll see that in the west it's much denser with smaller trees. In this area here, about 10 years ago, I did a contract with the nature preserves where we thinned the little trees out and released a lot of the spice bush and hazelnut, opening this way up more of a woodland than the closed forest that it was becoming. The first year we did it, I had woodcocks doing song dances right out of this. And with no fire the past 10 years, it's starting to fill back up. But it's still obviously that looks differently here than it does around the same piece. This tree was 430 years old, and it died shortly after I discovered it. If it would have survived, it would have been 450. But it's amazing how long a dead tree still lasts and still is productive to the forest. It's home and habitat for many animals. It's food and fodder for many insects in their larval form, which become bird food and for other things. Its nutrient cycle is breaking back down to the soils that once it came from. So its life will be complete. Its watch has just begun. See those rocks halfway down the slope? In 1932, a Conservation Corps camp was at Carpenter Park. They built the stone shelter that's here at the park. They also had several cabins on this ridge across from us. The rock is concrete from where they had a cable suspension bridge that came to this side of the ravine. And all that's left of it is the foundation for it now. On the other ridge is a flagstone concrete where the flagpole used to set, and that's the only relics left from the Conservation Corps camp. This was a photo of the Carpenter Mill, and if you go to the sandstone cliff near the bridge, you can look across and still see the foundation stones from where this mill once sat. But they ground corn and sawed wood at the mill. Before the mill, William Carpenter had a ferry and would get people across the river where the bridge currently is. In 1820, William Carpenter came and settled here, and then later built a cabin, ran the ferry, and built the mill. Early on in the history of Sangamon County, his wife is quoted as being nervous when she could see the wigwam lodges of the Kickapoo Prairie Indians who would come and winter camp here on this side of the river of Carpenter Park during the winter. He passed this land on to his daughter, Sarah Carpenter, and in 1921 she sold what we know as Carpenter Park to the Springfield Parks and Boulevard Commission, which later became the Springfield Park District. In the late 20s and early 30s, in urban settings, people were heating with coal. It was terrible to breathe, and lots of major cities started trying to buy large tracts of land for good air for their citizens. Central Park in New York came in the same period. All of the parks that we know in Chicago were all put aside in the 20s and 30s. Springfield was no different. Carpenter Park was their first setting. Lincoln Park and then Washington Park soon followed. All places where the citizens could come out from their apartments and close urban living to find good plots to rest, relax, and breathe good air. At Carpenter Park, there are 3 known early woodland burial mounds. These mounds are only about a foot or 2 high. Most of them have between 50 and 150 people buried in them. Indians have utilized this property forever. And even Mrs. Carpenter noted them coming when they lived here in 1823, I believe. But if you know the site, easy to find the mounds here. This large white oak behind me is showing us where shade has pruned off lower limbs. So once it had a limb at about 7 feet, indicating that this was a very open area historically. More recent tree growth has caused it to shed its lower limbs. This is the last large white oak on our trail today. We're almost back to the parking lot. This white oak, 395 years old, almost 400 years old. For me, it's hard to fathom 400 years in my head, but a magnificent specimen. This trip and hike was brought to you by the Friends of the Sangamon Valley. We're a non-for-profit, conservation-based group working the 9 counties surrounding Sangamon County. $35 membership can be your contribution to help more research, more management, and more educational tours, much like this. And if you become a member, you get our newsletter, you get to find out about all the trips that we're doing like this all the time. Come out on a work day, restore an acre of land and see how you connect to it. We're just about empowering people to take over ownership of public properties or learn how to manage and maintain your own property. We can help anyone who wants to work on the land. Friends of Sangamon Valley.